Welcome, everybody, to Parenting and Mental Health. My name is Dr. Court, and I'm glad you're here. So, I want to give a few minutes to let other people join in. While we're waiting, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the slides that we go through, and we'll go from there. Awesome. So, again, this is Parenting and Mental Health. My name is Dr. Amanda Court. Many of you know me as Dr. C or Dr. Amanda or Hey You. You've probably also used that. All of the following work. As always, every week we go over ground rules. Want to make sure that everyone understands that this is an inclusive environment. So we're going to explore all sides of issues. We're going to talk through things. Just because I'm talking about parenting and I am a parent doesn't mean I'm an expert. In fact, quite the contrary. I am not an expert. What I am an expert in is the research that goes along with the psychology of mental health and the world of parenting and things like that. So I have lots of research to share, and I can share that with you, and then we can talk through. And the other thing that I have a little bit of knowledge about is how I've seen clients and others deal with certain parenting topics and how parents can deal with improving their own mental health as well as others. This environment is also a private environment. So this is not a place for where you will share to other people, say, hey, I saw so-and-so in the session, they were talking about their child. This is a session where we want everyone to feel safe and feel comfortable. Basically being able to know that everyone in the room is going to hold what we talk about in this session and it stays in this session. Finally, again, we all want to actively listen. I have gotten much better at this with time. So if you have a question, often I ask that people bring some form of paper or writing with you. If you have a question, write it down, raise your hand. I'll get to you when the time's appropriate. We always have question and answers at the end. And we will have discussion sessions kind of throughout. Spend a little bit of time in the front with a little bit of what we call psychoeducation, a little bit of topic knowledge. And then we move to the back and we'll have discussion groups and we will talk about, maybe bring up, somebody will be brave enough to talk about something they're handling, and we'll deal with it together. So, okay, so those are the rules. Without further ado, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so tonight I thought we could talk a little bit about emotional literacy. So what does that mean? Oh, see that my screen is paused for some reason. Okay, good. So what does it mean to be emotionally literate? Well, I think we're going to have a little fun tonight. And I am going to send everyone in the chat a something that something we can take together in the hopes that I want you to take this quiz. It's a free quiz. Just put it in the chat. Take that quiz. I'll stop or actually I'll keep recording because that way this is just one video. Or I'll pause the recording and we'll give everyone a chance to take the test. Then we'll come back together. We'll talk a little bit about emotional literacy or emotional intelligence, and then we can discuss our results and some ways that we've used this in the past. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Okay, well, we'll bring it back together. So I think everyone's had time to process their particular emotional intelligence, and you got a title at the end of it. So there might have been diplomat or leader or any number of other names, poet. And then it went into the nice thing I liked about this particular test is it went into different categories. It talked about self-awareness, other awareness, right? Your external. So internal, right? Intrinsic awareness, external or extrinsic awareness, emotional control. So that's something we talk a lot, and I talk a lot about with kids and adults. Empathy, right? Feeling the room, feeling the energy around, being able to feel how other people feel, or at least notice that something's changed, something's different. And then well-being, right? How well do you do with all of these skills or lack of skills? Um, so with, self-awareness is measured as the ability to effectively recognize and identify one's own emotional experiences, right? So can you recognize what emotion you're having and are able to articulate properly what that is? So oftentimes in session, I spend a lot of time with the feely wheelie. And if you haven't seen it, I will definitely bring that up in one of these sessions. A lot of times people will say, well, I was really, I'm okay, or I'm fine. What does that mean? Right. And of course, as a therapist, people get annoyed with me. Well, what does fine mean to you? Right. I know it's an annoying question, but it's really important for people to be able to dig deeper and say, well, what does fine mean to me? Because fine to one person could really mean like, I'm doing great. I am content with life. Fine to another person could mean I'm just getting by and I'm really struggling. Right. Same word, totally different meanings. Um, Other awareness is when we're talking about awareness measured as the ability to effectively perceive and understand the emotions of others, right? So people who score higher on this are more likely to be highly attuned to nonverbal cues, body language, facial expressions, um, and that type of language can provide valuable information when discussing with someone or when trying to negotiate something. Teachers, really good teachers can have this skill really honed because they'll be teaching something, they'll notice the cues of students. Maybe they're not really getting a concept, or maybe they've gotten it and they're already bored. Really good teachers will jump in on that and be able to shift accordingly, right? Um, but if we're not good at this, and you can always talk about the people that you know in your life or have met that are super socially awkward, they don't get the cue that, hey, I really don't want to talk right now, or hey, you're making me feel uncomfortable, right? They don't get those cues, then this is a skill that, they often become really awkward and social. Oftentimes, kids, when they're very little, have awareness, but they don't have correct interpretation. So oftentimes kids will get too close to people or do things they're not supposed to. They're still learning. So this is definitely one they have to grow on. They also have to work on self-awareness. Really, the self-awareness one, they're aware of it. They don't have the words for what's really going on yet, which is true for most people. And where kids really struggle is emotional control, right? So this doesn't mean you don't feel the feeling. All feelings are meaningful. All feelings are meant to be had. What this means is that once you feel the feeling, what do you do with it? What is your behavior that follows your feeling? So if I'm mad or angry, do I go and hit someone or something? That's probably really poor emotional control, right? But so we want to see how you can regulate this and how not only just the behavior after, but how much that emotion takes over what you do. How long do you sit in that emotion? Obviously, for tougher situations, people can sit in the emotion much longer than others, right? Um, People with lower emotional control often find it difficult to cheer themselves up or regulate their emotions in a positive direction. This is also a skill that can be honed. Empathy. Empathy is measured as the ability to understand and relate to the emotional experiences of others. So this, you may not always sense that someone said, maybe you do, maybe you have that skill of sensing it. But when someone tells you, oh, this horrible thing happened to me, you don't change the subject to like, wow, I'm really glad that the Orioles just won their baseball game today. right? You can sit with them and say, wow, that must have been really hard, right? That empathy tends to be something that therapists are very good at, maybe something that other professions are not very good at. For instance, lawyers might not have great empathy, or judges. Um, well-being is the last one. I love that this test covers that. So well-being, we're talking about an individual's overall psychological, emotional, and social prosperity, right? Their overall state. So people that score higher in this tend to have positive attitudes towards life. So while there can be toxic positivity, we still do have a lot of research around people that see the glass as half full, right? Tend to be able to be more resilient, right? They have more hope, they have more faith. Um, they're more able to trust people, which means they're more able to make new relationships, and lasting, stronger relationships have led to better quality of life and longer quality of life from a study that was done by Harvard not too long ago. It came out, it's longitudinal, and they found that people that had really strong, close relationships of a certain number, I think they said anywhere from 4 to 10. And if you know the study, I apologize if I'm not misquoting it. But when you have that, and you're able to keep these relationships, your overall quality of life, your physical health, your mental health is better, right? So people who are able to have positive attitudes towards life and experience gratitude and have fulfillment and feel satisfaction, purpose, they tend to have stronger social skills, positive relationships, less conflict. Okay. So I thought this was fun to take this, try it out for a bit. That gives us a good sense of where we stand. And then from there, we've got to figure out, okay, well, how do we use where we are? The good news is your emotional intelligence, just like your IQ, it is not stagnant. Okay. It's not stationary. You can change it. And I know for a long time they said IQ was static. It actually is not. Um, there's a lot of shift there. And what we've found is that people can hone their skills, right? There might be some people that have some innate qualities or might be a little bit better with social skills when they're young. And that seems that they have that overall better intelligence, but oftentimes it's just because they grew up with people around them that had a high EQ. And so they were able to hone it. If you have a child right now that has a low EQ, or a partner, or you yourself feel like your EQ isn't great, the good news is we can work on those skills. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So let's get a little more into it. I'll go back to sharing my screen and we'll talk about um, emotional intelligence. Okay, so now that we've taken the test, let's go into a few things. First, I want to talk about meta emotions. Now, I may have mentioned this in a previous session. I thought it was really important to go back over it. So anytime you put meta in front of something, it means like if you have meta thoughts, that means it's thoughts about thoughts, right? So meta emotions are emotions about emotions, right? We basically are studying our emotions, right? So we're going to break down emotions. And I kind of went into this a little bit. We are all going to have emotions. They have a purpose, right? They are our body's way of talking to us, right? If we have to separate out kind of our conscious mind from all of these other activities that are going on in our body unconsciously or subconsciously, then there's kind of like these two parts of us, right? And that's always happening. Because if we had to pay attention to our heart beating and breathing and me reading these slides and talking to you, one of those things would stop and my life function would fail, right? So we have our conscious mind, we have our subconscious mind. So subconsciously, our body still has triggers to things that were before conscious. So for instance, a great example of this I use is, to this day, I cannot eat the candy Raisinets. They're like these white chocolate covered raisins. Cannot eat them. They make me nauseous as soon as I look at them. Why? Because when I was a child, I was having this amazing experience. My siblings were taking me to the movies. I was really excited. This is a great event for me. They bought me Raisinets. I promptly ate them. And in a short period of time, I got very, very nauseous and vomited everywhere, right? It ended up being a horrible experience. So my brain associated the Raisinets with bad experience. So is that true? No, I don't think the Raisinets had anything to do with my nausea. I think I got sick from something else. My logical brain knows that, but my subconscious body continues to associate that. We all have that happen. We hear a name and it triggers something, right? We see something and it makes us feel a certain way. We smell something and we feel an emotion. So our emotions are our body's way of telling us, like, in the past, that wasn't very good. Or in the past, hey, that was really good. We want to do that again. So all emotions are meant to be felt and they're meant to be expressed in a certain way. This means that if you're angry, it is important to express the anger in some way. Now, does that mean that you react in the anger and go and punch something or yell at something? No. And trust me, we've all been there. What we have to do is break that emotion down and recognize it's there and know which one it is. So that's really important. That's getting that emotional literacy, having that vocabulary to know the difference between anger, irritation, annoyance, disgruntlement, right? They're all slightly different. Being, just furious, that's probably worse than anger, right? We can put them on a scale. When I work with kids, oftentimes we put that scale together and we work on where those different emotions land. Um, then we want to interpret what that emotion is trying, what is our body trying to tell us? Why are we angry right now? So a lot of the people I see, they're not sure why. They're like, every time I hear the name Michael, I get really angry. Okay. Now, most of us have a clue. They go, yeah, when I was little, this happened, whatever. I had a teacher named Michael and he yelled at me every day. It made me feel really bad about myself. I'm totally making this up, but we might know. So as a parent, we have to recognize that sometimes with our emotions, our kids are going to be triggers, right? They're going to trigger things that might remind us of ourselves, might remind us of a good part of ourselves. It might remind us of a bad part of ourselves. It might remind us of another person. If you are a parent that's gone through a divorce and it was not the best split, your child might remind you of the other biological parent, and that might not be a good memory. We have to recognize that. And then we have to interpret it and say, okay, and then allow our logical brain to take over. And instead of reacting, right, we're going to have conscious behavior. So that's how we kind of break down emotions into categories. Okay. So one of the first things parents can do when we're dealing with emotions is when a child is having an emotional response, right? They're getting triggered by something. We want to try and connect with the child. And whether it's with children, if you're a parent and you're dealing with other adults, same thing, right? You see someone having a reaction. You see if you have a really good EQ or you have really good sense of others and you're noticing these emotions coming up, you notice that emotion's there, right? So now you don't want to react to it. So I noticed this the other night. I was watching two people as a mother-daughter situation. The daughter was really frustrated with the mother. The mother was not following the instructions, the medical instructions that were given to her, right, as an elder mother. And the daughter got really angry. The daughter has been handling the mother's issues for years now, right? Taking care of her. She's at her wit's end. This is just another data point that her brain goes, wait a minute, the mom's not doing what they're supposed to do again. This is going to be bad. And the daughter reacted and got angry. So when the daughter got angry, the mother got angry, and it kept going back and forth. They were feeding on each other's anger. So when that happens, obviously it's not going to end well. So what we want to have happen in those situations, and if you have children or you've dealt with your parents, elderly parents or what have you, or other people, when that happens, when we get triggered and we feel those negative emotions, we have to recognize the emotion first. One of the quickest tools I give people is name it to tame it. I teach this to kids. I teach this to every age level. When you feel angry, when you feel mad, when you feel happy, say it out loud. Okay. So especially for the negative ones, Wow, I'm feeling super irritable right now. Saying it out loud is not a bad thing. In fact, what it does is it takes it out of your reactionary subliminal part of your brain and it puts it into your conscious brain. You've just put it in your conscious brain, and now you're able to slow down your reaction and react more appropriately to the situation. Is it appropriate for the daughter to yell at the mother or to yell at someone else because she's mad, because she's been dealing with this for so long? It's so frustrating. Is that going to get her the result she wants? Probably not, right? So giving her a second to say, Mom, this is really this makes me so angry because I want you to be healthy and you're not doing the things that make you healthy. And then her doing that gives her a breath. It allows everyone to process. And it also is something no one else can take away how you're feeling. So then the mother to say, I'm sorry I'm making you angry, or like, I'm angry too, right? Now you've just connected. And it totally changes the dynamic of the situation. Okay. So if we're dealing with a child, we want to remember what it was like to be a child. So part of this is going to the empathy skill. And you want to remember what it was like to be a kid. I want you to try to remember a moment where maybe it was good, bad, whatever, but where you had a strong emotional response. Okay. And feel what it was like as a kid. And now I want you to think. So that's step one. Okay. Or another exercise you could do is an emotion your child has frequently. Maybe they get angry a lot. You want to think back to when you were a kid. When did you get angry? And, sometimes we can't remember something that happened when we were 5, but we might be able to remember something when we were 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe 12, whatever. As far back as you can go, remember it. And really give yourself a chance to feel that whole situation. What really upset you, right? How did that feel as a kid? And really put yourself in that kid's shoes. Because then suddenly, when you're seeing your kid's own anger, you're going to get it, right? Was it so infuriating when your little brother or sister came in and broke all your toys? I can remember as a kid, I had this one family friend. The child was their kid, the family friend's children were a little bit younger than me. So whenever they came over, because the first couple times they came over, they broke my toys and they stole them. And so the next time I hid my favorite toys. And I remember my mom getting mad at me because I hid my favorite toys, and that wasn't very nice. I was told it wasn't nice, and I wasn't sharing, it wasn't okay. Now, I get where my mom was coming from, and maybe in hindsight, instead of just kind of telling me I was an awful person, she could have been like, you know, pulling one of these. I can imagine it would be really frustrating for someone to walk into your home and take something that you really like. I don't like it when, insert person, right? I could say, I don't like it when your father moves the car keys because then I can't find them. I don't know where I'm going, right? Or your father doesn't like it when I move his stuff around and we always get in arguments. So I totally get it's frustrating. Maybe you can share some other, right? Like, so then you like start with the recognition of the emotion that's validating them. And then you move into letting them hear you. And then that's the connection point. And then from there, you can go to a point of what are your alternatives, right? So maybe you don't want them to play with your favorite toy. So you shouldn't play with your favorite toy tonight either. So why don't you play with some other toys that maybe you're not as worried about and you can just play with them for tonight and that will keep your toy nice, whatever the solution is, right? I'm making this up as I go along, but that can really help the kid, right? And that's going to create a connection or what we call creating emotional intelligence. So you've created a connection with the child, like, you know what? My dad gets mad at me all the time when I move his stuff, or I drive his car, or whatever. Like you know, and when you tell the child that, when you recognize and you can empathize with what they're going through by saying like, "Hey, I felt this too," and not just saying I felt this, but giving them an example, possibly if possible, something they've seen before, right? I hate it when dad takes food off my plate, or I never liked it growing up when my dad would always ask for a lick of my ice cream cone and then he licked half of the ice cream away, right? Whatever it is, you've just now connected with your child. Now they feel safe and they feel like you're hearing them. And you can do this with adults too. This is not unique to children. And then from there, you go to emotional awareness, right? So you've identified the emotion, you validated it, you made a connection because you said like, hey, I've been there too, and let's problem solve this together. Let's think of a new way to deal with this problem. Let's try and find something else. And what that does is create this magical moment, this opportunity where you have a chance to influence your child and teach them to make a better decision. Okay. So last week we did a little activity and we started looking at the different sayings, which one was being creating a magical moment and being emotionally intelligent, which one wasn't. I think you all can figure those out. What and last week we also talked about reflecting on children's, what hopes you have for them. So one thing I didn't talk about last week that I wanted to kind of come back to was that the reason I asked at the end of last week for people to reflect on the hopes that you have for your children is because that's really you plugging in to what expectations you're thrusting on your kids, right? So when you get really, pick any sort of extracurricular event or even school, right? When you start getting mad at them because they brought home a quiz that had two questions wrong and you're really angry, right? And you recognize your anger. Think for a second where that's coming from. Were your parents really tough on you when you got your grades? And maybe you appreciate that now, right? Because you're successful and you've done well. And maybe when you recognize that, you can say, hey, you know what? My parents were really tough on me with grades when I was young. At the time, I just thought they were being mean. What I found out is by them really pushing me to do my best, I've been able to be really successful and I've been able to handle a lot of really stressful things and do amazing things because they kind of pushed me to always try and do my best. So again, you've taken a moment where you feel this emotion, right? Like I'm angry that they're not doing well. Um, and you've turned it into a connection point. Hey, my parents did this, I remember growing up, my parents used to get mad about this. And yeah, I'm not too thrilled that you didn't do super well on this. And then like letting them know that said, like, let's figure out how this doesn't happen again and turning it into a learning moment and letting them know that you're there for them and you're ready to connect. So I've talked a lot tonight. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I want to just throw out there that, emotional intelligence, again, is something that we can all learn. Where it starts is recognizing we're having that emotion. And part of that is going to be becoming familiar with a lot of emotion words. So if you look up feelings wheel, it gives you tons of emotions. And practicing saying those emotions out loud with your family, right? Your kids, your parents, whatever, that's going to help you become more emotionally aware. It's going to help you to then process your emotions better. And it'll give you a chance to connect with the other person that's around, right? It feels super weird at first to go, I am angry, right? Maybe don't say it that way, but take a breath and be like, I'm really angry right now. And then just talk your thoughts out loud. So something I've learned to do personally is I will say to my kids, um, I'm really irritated right now. And I'm irritated because I've asked you now 3 times to do this chore and you still haven't done it. And it irritates me that I have to ask you 3 times because what I'm asking you to do is important for you. It's a skill, something important for you to learn how to do, right? Like maybe it's teaching them to brush their teeth. Like it's important for you to know how to brush your teeth because it's taking care of your health, right? Whatever the thing is, I then explain why I'm so adamant about them doing the thing, right? And so then the kid can recognize, okay, mommy's just not yelling at me to yell at me. It's not do as I say, not as I do, or just do it because I said so. When has that ever worked, right? Maybe you did it once or twice, but then you're like, forget this. I don't have to do this, right? You get to a point where you're like, I don't have to do what you want me to do. That doesn't feel good for either person, right? So I'll say, I'm really irritated right now because, and now it's gotten to the point where, one, my older child will come right back at me and be like, "Hey, mommy, I think you seem irritated right now. Is there something I can do?" Brilliant, right? Now he recognizes it. And I can also say, "You know what? I am really irritated right now, buddy. It has nothing to do with you. I love you. I'm irritated because the delivery man dropped something off and the box is broken into shreds and what I ordered is completely destroyed. Or I'm irritated because I just got in an argument with my coworker or whatever, right? Um, or I can say, yeah, I'm irritated because of something that happened between he and I. And so it's good now, and they can recognize, I can also ask them, like, hey, what irritates mommy? And then they can tell me, and then I don't have to re-ask them to do something. They know I've already asked them 3 times. So homework for the week, go out, practice saying your emotions out loud, maybe try and learn a couple new emotion words. Maybe that's something I'm going to start doing from here out. We're going to keep doing these Wellness Wednesdays for as long as we can. We're going to try and get as much information as possible. We're going to do a little bit more with emotions and communication. I really want to get as many people on here as possible. So please invite your friends. It's free. It's open to anyone. You don't have to be a Bay community patient or member to join these. I really want everyone to come on, join this, and come and talk about stuff. We're all in this together. We're all in it to help each other. So have a good night. Go practice saying your emotions out loud and bring those experiences back to our next session next week, Wednesdays, 6 to 7, same Zoom room every time. All right. Have a good night.